we've had visiting artists come in from outside the Bakersfield area, from outside Southern California in a lot of cases, to put on a show in the gallery, and when possible, they've come in to do a lecture as well. So we're really lucky to have artists come in and do this when they can make time for it. And the last show that we're having for this academic year is a solo exhibition of Daniel Herwitt's work. And this is the visiting artist, Daniel Herwitt. I'll let him talk in a moment. But just so you guys understand the basic structure, if you have not been over to the gallery, it's going to be open Mondays and Wednesdays, 1 to 4 for the rest of the semester. And the show of Daniel Herwitt's work is going to be up in the gallery for the entirety of April and possibly for the last week or two of school. But definitely for the month of April it will be open. And if you guys are around in the afternoon today, we're going to have the reception, the opening reception for the show from 4 to 7 p.m. at the gallery. So it's usually the best time to visit the show, but if you guys can't swing by this afternoon, again, it'll be open basically for the rest of the semester. So I encourage you guys to go by, especially if you're here for the artist lecture. And before we get into this is essentially a lecture, but it's going to be conversational between me and Mr. Herwitt, and I think I know most of you guys at this point, but if you have not been to one of these, I'm Tom Bethausen, I'm the director of the gallery. Not that that's pertinent to this conversation, but I'm going to be prompting the artists with questions, and if you guys have questions yourself, I'll encourage you to hold it till the end. We'll go for about 30-40 minutes between the two of us, and then I'll open it up for 10 or 15 minutes for you guys to ask questions as well. And just as a general introduction for Daniel, he is an artist who has been making work centered around labor-intensive rendering. It's loosely jumped back and forth and wound up really concentrating for the last several years on a kind of subversive rendering relationship. That won't happen again. I won't let it. Sorry, I didn't walk. Thanks. But again, just a general introduction. We'll get into this, and we'll have Daniel talk about his work chronologically also. But he's been making work that's in a general vein of subversive, kind of labor-intensive rendering. Has a lot, or a very strong relationship in one way or another to traditional oil painting, traditional still life work, traditional landscape, and portraiture also. But the work that we have up, in the gallery right now is work that's been made more or less in the last 3 months. And I would say, based on seeing the history of his work, is a pretty accurate summation, or not conclusion, but it encompasses sort of the history of his work that I've been familiar with over the last few years. So without further ado, again, we're very lucky to have Daniel come out here and do this lecture, so we can give a mandatory round of applause for him. And for the rest of this, I'll hand the mic off to him, but when I ask questions, I'll just be essentially yelling. But I'll start off, maybe we can just, as we talked about, get into just general biography stuff. You started off in Colorado early on. You had a pretty strong relationship with visual art from a very early age, but you ended up in state school in Colorado, and you made the really important transition into fine art, switching cities, and we can maybe start off with that transition, the decision, and the effect of that shift.
Hello. Everyone can hear me okay? All right. So, as Tom was saying, I guess early on in the beginning, my parents really fostered art making, and I was, in a sense, kind of pushed in that direction. My father would doodle a lot, and he collected a lot of comics, so I had that kind of early interaction with this kind of, I don't know, specific sort of drawing and rendering. And I guess as time went on, I took art classes, and I guess with state school, I don't know, I just wanted to get credits, kind of just finish up, general education. But I went to, I guess, SAIC, so that's a school, the Art Institute of Chicago, and that's where kind of it became really rigorous and a lot of investment in my work. And that was kind of like the important sort of turning point of where it became really, really involved and really serious about making art, but it's always something that I want to do. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but it was just like, you know, I knew that it's something that I wanted to really explore. And I guess the biggest sort of transition was I wanted to start out as kind of like I was interested in tattoo, flash, interested in more underground comics, anime, and I wasn't really looking at like per se like fine art at the time, but during that transition period of going to art school, those interests sort of meshed with fine arts. Since this school had, you know, you're at the museum, and that's kind of your, you know, research station. So those two kind of interests started to mix of like looking at still life, looking at landscape, and then kind of meshing with comics with that kind of language.
And before we move on from that, when you went to the School of Art Institute of Chicago, that was a pretty big transition, I assume, but what, just on the ground, like your initial transitional phase, what was the school like in comparison to the environment you've been in?
I mean, I guess you're surrounded by a lot of other students who are also really serious about art making and about having a practice, and you're kind of like ushered into, I don't know, just to trying to have relationships with those other artists and like, you know, ideas sort of, it's just the range is greater, the spectrum is greater, but all that becomes very beneficial for your process. And just having like that engagement, the engagement gets stronger in that situation.
And just for those of you guys that aren't familiar with that school, School of the Art Institute of Chicago is, I don't know what it technically classifies as, but it operates like a 4-year private art school. You don't go there to study anything that's not related to visual art, performing art.
Right.
So it's a very serious structural change from going to a general education state school environment.
In that school specifically, it's very open-ended. You know, there's just a BFA, and you can sort of experiment with printmaking, with sculpture, with painting, with drawing. So there's not really like a direct path that you take. It's very like make your own kind of adventure.
And it's a very ambitious school. Like to go there, there's a lot of pressure on the students, and it's considered like one of the most ambitious bachelor's degrees you could get if you're studying fine art really specifically. So,
yeah. And I chose that mainly because I had family out there. So it wasn't really, I was looking at Pratt and I was looking at RISD, but having the museum component, because like I'm really interested in putting work into, you know, contemporary context, but also historical context. Like I like those kind of ghosts of the past sort of talking or having that kind of in the work, and having like, you know, I look at like Dutch Golden Age work a lot, and just having that kind of, I don't know, that mood, that sort of echoing in there. So that was kind of the key to like choosing that school, was I knew I would be like in contact with that kind of work.
And that's a unique aspect of that school. There's only a handful of undergraduate fine arts programs that have a really close relationship with a world-class museum, and the Art Institute, or it's a confusing acronym.
School of the Arts of Chicago.
And the museum was essentially, it was first, right?
Yeah, the museum was first, the school was in the museum, and then now the school is in the back, and it's kind of this brutalist architecture looking kind of pillbox building.
And they're literally connected by like a tunnel, right?
Well, yeah, there's like a hallway that goes through the back.
But it's a very unique aspect of that program. It's not something that a lot of programs have, so it affected your decision.
Yeah, like if you need to know how to draw or paint like a sandal, you know, you can go find a sandal in the museum in a painting, and like that's how you can kind of start to like know how to get that sort of shadow or that kind of highlight, or yeah, those specific like technical.
And how would you
aspects.
characterize like what your work was before going there and after a couple of years there? What were the major transitions and interests in the process?
I mean, I guess I was, I guess, more interested in like a commercial more like commercial investment in the work. Like it looked, again, like with, I was doing like tattoo flash and kind of practicing for that kind of job. This is before. And I guess like SAIC allowed me to like I wanted to create my own world and sort of have more control, where I was on a more like commercial path before, I guess, in the work, because it was more illustrative. Like it's sort of a weird, I don't know, I would say that my work is still illustrative, but now I would say that the narrative is a little more complicated and more mysterious. And that I guess, yeah, you just start to learn like your own voice and what you want to do, how you want to construct kind of your own environment, I guess, in your work.
What do you think specifically might have instigated that in the program?
I guess just the spectrum of instructors, really, of who you work with, and just like having your eyes just open and being able to like accept a lot of different languages. When I say languages, I just mean like different ways of visualizing objects and space, and so.
Who were some of the influential instructors when you were there?
I guess like the big names would be there's the Chicago Imagists, and so this is they're called the Harry Who as well. So artists like Jim Nutt and Carl Worsam, and who would they be kind of equivalent to? Like their work, have you ever seen like Beavis and Butthead? Like that kind of like almost like flat, like very, there's kind of a sarcasm, and it's very like opaque sort of coloring with like very black outlines of like just weird characters, but they're like an important group in Chicago at the time because they were kind of doing the opposite of the New York, abstractionists. So like.
And that was in the 1980s.
Oh no, this is earlier. So like 60s, 70s. So they teach also Gladys Nielsen. She teaches there as well.
So these were artists that were in their 20s, 30s, in 60s, 70s, and they were teaching at the school. They had established themselves. They were older. And
right.
They were influenced.
Because like each art school kind of has its own flavor, and because of the artists that work there and who have created like a certain type of texture for themselves, and that's like what kind of trickles down. So a lot of students were aware of like this group of artists, the Harry Who or the Chicago Imagists. So some of them choose to go there because of those teachers. So it's always like a good thing to kind of know who the faculty are in those situations, so that you can see kind of like the aesthetics that are being sort of like pushed onto the curriculum in a sense.
Were you aware that those artists were teaching there before making the decision to go to that?
No, it was all very new to me. So it was kind of like just like a nice, it was accidental in a sense.
Yeah. It is, and that movement, if you guys are, fine arts majors or even graphic arts majors, looking up Chicago Imagism, it's a pretty obscure movement by broad historical standards, but it's a very specifically American and Midwestern movement that was kind of a branch of pop art.
Yeah.
It was very influenced by the popular graphic arts, but it was a purely fine art movement, and it still does have a really serious, palpable influence over young artists in Chicago, and a lot of people.
It's kind of it's just like it's dirtier. It's not as clean as like New York pop artists. Yeah, it's a little grimier,
Yeah.
and I mean you can see from my work like that's kind of what I'm attracted to, like notions of like wabi sabi or just things that are like unfinished or like some state of like decomposition. So.
Well, okay, so your time there was characterized by that transition, and then you, at some point, made the decision to leave Chicago, leave the Midwest, via graduate school. What was that decision process like in your last year or two in undergrad?
Well, after I graduated, I was working at a museum just in membership. I was at the MCA, so the Museum of Contemporary Art, which is in Chicago, and I knew that I wasn't done. You know, I was still working a lot after I got out of undergrad, because you'll find, like, you know, that's like a key moment. Like, you gotta sort of just keep working, because a lot of my peers would stop like after undergraduate school, and then, you know, that'd be it. It'd be really hard for them to kind of get rejuvenated. But
Stop producing art.
yeah, stop producing art. So I just know I knew I wanted more, and I wasn't really done, but I couldn't necessarily like facilitate like my own like exploration on my own yet. I still needed kind of assistance. So I guess like that's part of like why I wanted to go to graduate school, just to kind of stay in that environment and being with other artists as well.
And you had how long? It's pretty common for a fine arts major, at least, to take a break. You took 1 or 2 years off in between undergraduate and graduate school.
Yeah, I took about a year and a half off.
Yeah. What constituted that year in terms of what was your practice like?
Yeah, I mean, I just worked in my apartment. Some friends had external studios, but yeah, I just worked in the living room and still just painted in oil. And I don't know, it was very comfortable for me to kind of do it that way. And I wasn't really working at a large scale. My work is relatively pretty small, so.
Like what size? What's your size?
I guess, let's say like 20 by 17 inches are usually like in that scale. But grad school, I got increasingly large.